On the edge of a sleepy village where mist lingered long after dawn, there stood an iron gate that no one dared to open. It was said to belong to a garden that only bloomed under moonlight, and those who entered never returned. Elara, a girl of 12 with hair like midnight silk, had always been drawn to the garden's mysteries. Her grandmother told her stories of the silver bell that hung on the ancient willow at its center, a bell said to grant a single wish if rung at the hour when the moon was highest. One evening, curiosity overcame her caution. She tiptoed from her cottage as the sun slipped below the hills, and the air grew hushed with the promise of secrets. In her hand, she clutched a small lantern, its gentle glow a warm flicker against the gathering dark. The iron gate loomed tall before her, its bars cool and rough beneath her fingers. She hesitated, listening to the whispers of wind and the soft rustle of leaves. She took a deep breath and pushed. The gate opened with a sigh, as though it had been waiting. Beyond it lay the midnight garden flowers, of colors she could not name, blossoms shimmering with dew that glowed like stardust. Moths with wings of gossamer drifted lazily, their dance weaving patterns of pale silver light. Elara stepped inside her bare feet, brushing soft grass that seemed to hum beneath her toes. The scent of night-blooming jasmine filled the air, sweet and heavy, and the distant chime of the silver bell teased her ears, though she could not see it yet. She walked deeper the path, winding like a dream. Each step felt like a promise, though she did not know what it promised. Shadows melted around her, yet she was unafraid. This was a place that had lived in her heart since she was a child, a place she had always known somehow. At the heart of the garden stood the ancient willow, its branches a silver cascade that shimmered in the moonlight. And there, swaying gently from the lowest bough, was the silver bell. Elara's breath caught in her throat. She reached out her fingers, trembling as they brushed the bell's cool surface. Its touch was like moonlight solidified cold and bright. She could feel the wish it held waiting. But before she could ring it, the garden itself seemed to stir. A voice soft as a sigh drifted through the leaves. Child of dusk, why do you seek the bell? Elara's heart thudded in her chest. She turned, but saw no one, only the willow's branches weaving in the gentle breeze. I have a wish, she whispered, unsure if the voice would answer. All who come to the midnight garden have a wish, the voice murmured. But the bell grants only to those who understand the price. A shiver ran down her spine. She realized then that the garden was listening, and that this was only the beginning of her journey. She looked once more at the silver bell glimmering in the moonlight, and knew she would not leave without learning its secrets. The silver bell shimmered softly as Elara withdrew her hand, her heart still trembling with the echo of the garden's voice. She took a step back, her eyes wide with wonder and a glimmer of fear. The garden was alive, watching, listening. The voice that had spoken to her did not return, but its words hung in the air like mist. She turned away from the bell and let her feet guide her down a narrow path that twisted away from the willow. The path was lined with As she walked, the soft chime of the silver bell faded behind her, replaced by a low melodic whisper. It was a song without words, woven from the rustling of leaves and the sigh of wind. Elara felt it pulse. She passed under arches of woven ivy, their shadows flickering like ghosts. In the heart of each arch was a small mirror, and as she stepped through, her reflection seemed to shimmer eyes, darker hair, glossier, like a dream of herself. She touched the glass once, but the surface was cool and unyielding. The song led her to a pool of water so still it looked like polished silver. Moonlight danced across its surface, and tiny fish with scales like coins flickered in and out of sight beneath the lily pads. On the far side of the pool stood a figure, a girl no older than Elara herself, though she seemed woven of moonlight and mist. The girl wore a dress of petals, each one a pale glow against the darkness. Her hair flowed like water, and her eyes held the weight of secrets. "Who are you?" Elara whispered. "I am Echo," the girl replied, her voice like the song of the garden itself. "I am the reflection of those who wander too far." Elara felt a chill run through her. "I'm not lost," she said softly. "Not yet," Echo murmured. but all who enter here must face their own reflection. Will you look? The pool rippled, and Elara stepped closer. She saw her own face staring back familiar, yet somehow different. Her eyes seemed deeper, filled with questions she had never dared to ask. She reached out and the water rippled again. Echo stepped forward, her hands cupped as if holding something precious. In her palms lay a single silver petal, trembling with a light all its own. "This is the first of 3 gifts," she said. "Each one will show you the way, but each comes with a choice." Elara took the petal, its glow sinking into her skin like a promise. She felt warmth spread through her, and the path ahead seemed to open wider, though shadows still lingered. "What is the choice?" Elara asked, but Echo only smiled a smile as fleeting as moonlight on water. "To see truly or to be blind," she said, and then she was gone, her form dissolving into mist. Elara closed her hand around the silver petal and took a breath. The garden seemed to hold its breath with her, waiting to see what she would do. She knew then that this was only the beginning, that the midnight garden would reveal itself petal by petal, secret by secret. And so she stepped forward, following the path of echoes, each footstep drawing her deeper into the heart of the garden's ancient magic. Elara felt the silver petal warm in her palm as she ventured deeper into the midnight garden. The moon hung high above a pale sentinel, casting silvery light through the tangled branches. Her path wound between twisted rose bushes, their blossoms the color of blood and moonlight. She could feel the garden's breath, each leaf and petal thrumming with a life of its own. The air was scented with roses and something sharper, something that pricked at the edges of her thoughts. At the end of the path stood a gate of living thorns, arching high and woven so tightly that not even moonlight could slip through. In its center, a figure sat waiting, an old woman, draped in a cloak of black feathers, her eyes glinting like dark jewels. "Who comes to the Keeper of Thorns?" The woman's voice rasped, carrying the weight of centuries. Elara swallowed, her fingers tightening around the silver petal. "I am Elara," she said softly. "I seek the truth of the garden." The old woman smelled, and the thorns around her shifted, curling like serpents at her feet. "All who seek the truth must pay in kind," she said. "What will you offer for passage?" Elara hesitated. She had nothing but the petal, the lantern's gentle glow, and her wish. "I have only myself," she said at last, her voice trembling but sure. The keeper's smile widened and she extended a bony hand. "Then, let us see your truth." With a flick of her fingers, the thorns parted, forming a tunnel of shadow and flickering light. Elara stepped forward, the air cool and filled with the scent of ancient earth. The thorns whispered as she passed, their voices weaving a song of warning. At the heart of the tunnel lay a pool of shadow. The old woman beckoned Elara closer. "Look," she said. "See what lies beneath the wish you carry." Elara knelt beside the pool. In its surface, she saw herself again, but this time the reflection was not alone. Shadows gathered around her, image shapes of doubt and fear, of all the things she had never spoken aloud. The keeper's voice was a soft hiss. "The wish you seek is not a gift, it is a mirror. It will show you what you are and what you must give up to become more." Elara reached out her fingertips, skimming the dark water. A ripple spread, and she saw the silver bell reflected there, bright and distant. She understood then that her journey was not just through the garden, but through herself. "I will pay the price," she whispered. "Then take this," said the keeper, and from the shadow she drew a silver thorn, its tip glinting with moonlight. Elara took the thorn, feeling its cold bite against her skin. It pulsed once like a heartbeat, and then lay still in her hand. "This is your second gift," the keeper said. "The thorn will guide you to what must be surrendered." The tunnel of thorns uncurled, opening to the next path. Elara stepped out, the silver petal in one hand, the silver thorn in the other. She knew now that the garden was not a dream, it was a test, and the deeper she went, the more the garden would ask of her. Elara emerged from the tunnel of thorns, the silver thorn and petal safe in her hands. The garden had grown even stranger, shadows lengthened and shimmered, and the air tasted of honey and secrets. She followed a winding path that curved like a question mark, a moonlight weaving silver threads along the ground. She had learned not to hurry. The garden moved at its own pace, and those who rushed were soon lost. A rustle in the darkness drew her gaze. A great moth fluttered near a cluster of night-blooming flowers, its wings shimmering like moonstone. It was unlike any creature she had ever seen, larger than her outstretched hand, with wings that seemed woven from memories and dreams. Elara held her breath as the moth drifted closer. Its wings beat slowly, casting pale light over her face. "Who are you?" she whispered. The moth's voice was a shimmer in the air, soft as the brush of wings. "I am the moth of memories," it said. "I carry the third gift, but only for those who remember." Elara frowned. "Remember who you are," the moth replied, "and what you have forgotten." It settled on a low branch, its wings folding around its body like a cloak. The garden fell silent, and in that silence, Elara closed her eyes. She thought of her grandmother telling her stories by the fire of heroes and witches of silver bells and midnight gardens. She thought of the nights she had stood at the window watching the moon and wondering what lay beyond the village. She thought of her own secret wish, the one that had led her here. When she opened her eyes, the moth was watching her with ancient knowing eyes. "I remember," she said softly. "I have always been a seeker of secrets, even when I was too afraid to speak them." The moth's wings quivered. "Then take this," it said, and from the soft down of its wings, it released a single silver thread. It floated to Elara's waiting hand, shimmering like moonlight in water. As soon as she touched it, memories she had forgotten rose in her mind, fragments of laughter and tears, the scent of rain on the roof, the quiet courage of her own heart. The moth rose into the air, circling her once before vanishing into the shadows. Elara watched it go, the silver thread in her hand pulsing with quiet light. She now held 3 gifts, the petal, the thorn, and the thread. She understood that each was a part of the garden's secret and a part of herself. Ahead, the path narrowed, framed by arching branches, like the ribs of a great beast. Elara took a breath and stepped forward, each step drawing her closer to the silver bell that waited at the garden's heart. And in the hush of the garden, the bell's chime echoed softly, as if calling her name. Elara clutched the 3 gifts, the silver petal, the thorn, and the shimmering thread close to her chest, as she stepped beneath the arch of branches. Beyond lay the heart of the midnight garden, a place so still it felt as though time had paused to watch her. Moonlight pooled in a glade of silver grass where flowers shone with a pale, ghostly light. At its center stood the ancient willow, its great roots sinking deep into the earth, its leaves rustling with a music all their own. And from the lowest bough, the silver bell hung, swaying softly in the moon-breathing breeze. Elara felt her heart stutter in her chest. The bell was even more beautiful up close, its surface etched with patterns that seemed to shift when she looked at the river's stars and secret pathways. Each line felt like a story half told. She stepped closer, each footfall ringing in the silence. The gifts in her hands pulsed with gentle warmth, and she understood they were keys, and this was the lock. "Are you ready?" The garden's voice was a hush of leaves and the sigh of the willow. Elara swallowed. "I am," she whispered. The silver petal melted into light in her hand, drifting up to weave around the bell like a soft glow. The thorn shimmered and sank into the earth at her feet, roots of silver twining around her toes. The thread wrapped around her wrist, binding her to the bell. A hush fell deeper than before, as though the garden itself was holding its breath. "You stand at the edge of wish and price," the voice murmured. "To ring the bell is to bind yourself to its truth. Do you understand?" Elara nodded. She had come too far to turn away now. Her wish had always been in her heart, to find the courage to see the world as it truly was, not as she feared it might be. She reached out and wrapped her fingers around the bell's cool, weightless body. For a moment, everything held still, moonlight breath the garden's watchful gaze. Then she rang the bell. Its chime was soft but endless, rolling out through the garden like a wave of silver. Flowers bowed their heads. The willow's leaves quivered as though in prayer. Elara closed her eyes, letting the sound fill her. In that sound, she heard every story ever whispered in the garden. Every secret, every sorrow. every hope that had ever been carried by the midnight wind. The silver thread around her wrist pulsed with light, and she felt the garden's magic wash over her cool and clear, like starlight in water. She saw herself reflected in 1,000 ways, a child, a seeker, a keeper of stories. When the bell's song faded, Elara opened her eyes. The garden was silent again, but it felt closer somehow, its secrets no longer hidden from her heart. She knew then that her wish had not been to change the world outside the garden, but to understand the world within herself. The bell hung quiet, its promise fulfilled, but Elara also knew the journey was not yet done. There were still paths to walk, truths to uncover, and a garden that would not let her leave unchanged. And so, with the silver bell's echo still singing in her bones, she stepped forward deeper into the midnight garden. As the last echoes of the silver bell faded, the garden seemed to exhale a soft sigh of petals and earth. Elara felt the weight of the garden's gaze on her shoulders, a warmth that settled deep in her bones. She stepped back from the willow. The gifts she had gathered now vanished into light and memory. Yet she felt their presence in her heart, a quiet certainty that she was no longer the same girl who had first entered the garden. A path unfurled before her, lined with pale blossoms that glowed like embers in the moonlight. She followed it, her bare feet brushing cool grass, her lantern flickering softly in her hand. At the end of the path stood the Keeper of Thorns, her black feathered cloak rustling like distant thunder. "You have rung the bell," she said, her voice grave, "and so you must face the choice it brings." Elara nodded, her heart steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I understand," she said. "What must I do?" The Keeper's dark eyes glittered. "The bell grants truth, but truth is never simple. You have seen the garden's secrets, but now you must decide what you will carry back into the world beyond these gates." Elara's breath caught. "You mean I cannot stay?" "The garden does not keep those who are not willing to be keepers in return," the Keeper said. "Will you carry its magic as a memory, or will you bear its burden as a guardian?" Elara looked around at the shimmering leaves, the soft sigh of the garden's breath. She thought of her grandmother's stories, of the way the garden had spoken to her in whispers and dreams. She knew now that the Midnight Garden was not just a place, it was a promise. "I want to be a guardian," she said quietly. "I want to remember and to keep its stories alive." The Keeper smiled, and for the first time her eyes softened. "Then you must take the final step," she said. She reached out, and from the shadows of her cloak, she drew a single silver key, delicate as moonlight, and etched with the garden's ancient runes. "This is the final gift," the Keeper said. "It will unlock the gate when the time is right. But remember, every key holds a choice. Once you leave the garden, we'll fade into legend, waiting for the next who dares to listen." Elara took the key, its cold weight settling into her palm. She felt the garden's magic pulse through her, a bond deeper than words. "Will I ever see it again?" she asked. "The garden lives in the heart of every dreamer," the Keeper said softly. "As long as you believe in its songs, it will never be lost." Elara closed her fingers around the key and bowed her head in gratitude. She turned back to the path, the silver bell's echo still singing in her blood. As she walked, the garden shifted around her blossoms, folding into sleep. Moonlight softening into dawn. She reached the iron gate, the silver key fitting perfectly in the lock. With a deep breath, she turned it. The gate opened with a sigh, and Elara stepped through, carrying the midnight garden in her heart. The iron gate closed softly behind Elara, its sigh of farewell echoing like a secret promise. She stepped back onto the familiar path that led to her grandmother's cottage, the sky above paling with the first breath of dawn. The world beyond the garden seemed both the same and utterly changed. The scent of night-blooming jasmine still clung to her hair, and moonlight still shimmered faintly on her fingertips. But in her heart, she carried the weight of the garden's magic, its songs, its stories, and its quiet, eternal breath. As she walked, dew-drenched grass brushed her ankles, and the hush of early morning was like a prayer. She felt the silver key warm against her skin, hidden in the small pocket of her dress. Its touch was a quiet comfort, a reminder that the midnight garden was never truly gone. Elara paused to watch the sunrise. The first light touched the hills, gold and rose and pale blue, painting the world in colors she had never seen so clearly. She understood then that the garden's magic was not just in its blossoms, or the silver bell, but in the way it had taught her to see. When she reached her grandmother's cottage, the old woman was waiting at the gate, her eyes bright with knowing. "You have walked the garden's paths," her grandmother said softly. Elara nodded, tears pricking her eyes. "I rang the bell," she whispered. "And I saw the truth of myself." Her grandmother smiled, lines of age deepening in her gentle face. "The bell's song is not easily forgotten," she said. "But neither is it meant to be. You have become part of its story just as it has become part of yours." Elara stepped into her grandmother's embrace, the scent of herbs and old wood wrapping around her like a lullaby. She knew then that she had not left the garden behind. It had woven itself into her thread by thread. That evening, Elara sat by the hearth as her grandmother tended the fire. She took out the silver key and traced its patterns, each line a memory of the garden's breath. "Grandmother," she said softly, "will I ever walk those paths again?" The old woman's eyes twinkled. "Perhaps not with your feet," she said. "But every story you tell, every secret you keep, will carry the garden's whisper. In that way you will never leave." Elara nodded, feeling the truth of those words settle into her bones. She had been a seeker of secrets, but now she was also a keeper. As the fire crackled and the night crept close, Elara closed her eyes and listened. In the hush of the cottage, she heard the faintest echo of a bell's silver chime, reminding her that the midnight garden lived on in every dreamer's heart. Night settled over the village like a velvet cloak, and Elara sat by the hearth, her silver key resting cool against her heart. The gentle crackle of the fire was a lullaby weaving shadows on the old wooden walls. Her grandmother sat across from her knitting by the fire's light, her needles clicking softly like the heartbeat of an ancient song. Outside, the world was wrapped in moonlight and the hush of sleeping fields. But within the cottage, stories waited to be born. Elara cleared her throat, feeling the warmth of the silver bell's echo in her chest. "Grandmother," she said softly, "may I tell you the story of the midnight garden?" Her grandmother's eyes twinkled, her smile patient and knowing. "Of course, child," she said. "For every story is a seed, and the telling of it is the way we tend the garden of memory." Elara began to speak, her voice weaving the threads of moonlight and silver petals of thorns and echoes, and a girl who dared to ring the bell. The words spilled from her like water from a hidden spring, soft and sure, each one a drop of magic. As she spoke, the shadows on the walls seemed to dance. She saw the garden bloom again, in the flicker of the fire, the silver bell swaying in the hush of moonlight. And in her grandmother's eyes, she saw the quiet wonder of one who had always believed. The garden lives in the heart of every dreamer. Elara said, her voice barely more than a whisper as she finished. Her grandmother nodded. "And every telling brings it closer," she said. "For stories are the threads that bind us to the things we cannot see but always feel." Elara felt the truth of those words settle in her bones, warm and soft as the fire's glow. She knew then that she was no longer just a child who had wandered into a midnight garden. She was a keeper of its magic, a teller of its tale. That night, as she lay in her narrow bed beneath the eaves, Elara dreamed of silver bells and moonlit paths. In her dreams, the garden waited patient and silent, its secrets blooming like flowers in the dark. She knew she would return, if not with her feet, then with every word she shared. For the garden lived wherever its stories were spoken, and in every heart that dared to listen. In the days that followed, Elara began to weave the midnight garden into the lives of those around her. Each evening, when the sky blushed pink and the first stars trembled awake, the children of the village gathered around her grandmother's hearth. They sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes bright with wonder, their laughter quieted to soft breaths as Elara's voice rose and fell like a gentle wave. She told them of the silver bell that sang to the moon, of the whispering moths and the keeper of thorns. She spoke of the silver key she carried, though she never showed it. Some things she knew were meant to be felt, not seen. The children listened, their wide eyes reflecting the flickering firelight like tiny mirrors. In their minds, the midnight garden took root, blossoms of imagination unfolding in secret corners. One night, as she finished the tale of Echo's silver petal, a little boy named Linan raised his hand. "Elara," he asked shyly, "if I dream of the garden, will it be real?" Elara smiled, her heart warming at the question. "Dreams are where the garden lives," she said, "and every dreamer brings it to life again." That night, Linan dreamt of walking through a moonlit archway of ivy, his tiny hands brushing silver petals that glowed beneath his touch. And when he woke, the scent of night-blooming jasmine clung to his hair, a secret he shared only with the dawn. Word of Elara's stories spread. The baker's daughter whispered them to her loaves, weaving magic into each crust. The old woodcutter carried them in the rhythm of his axe, each stroke a song of roots and earth. Even the shy weaver wove silver threads into her cloth, dreaming of gardens that never faded. Elara watched the magic grow, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. Every telling brings the garden closer, and though she walked only the familiar paths of the village by day, each night she returned to the garden in her dreams. The silver bell still sang to her soft and distant, promise that the garden's magic would never truly fade. That night, sleep came to Elara like a gentle tide. She closed her eyes to the flicker of the hearth's last embers and drifted into the soft dark where dreams bloom. In the hush of her dream, she found herself once more standing at the gate of the midnight garden. But this time, the iron bars shimmered like starlight, and the gate opened at her touch without a single sigh. She stepped into the garden's embrace, moonlight painting silver paths beneath her feet. The air was warm with jasmine and the hush of ancient secrets. She followed the winding path she knew by heart, her bare feet brushing grass that seemed to sing. At the heart of the garden, the silver bell waited, swaying softly from the willow's lowest branch. Its chime was a whisper in the night, as though it had been waiting for her return. Elara approached, her heart full of wonder and a quiet ache. "You have returned?" said the garden's voice, soft and shimmering. "I dreamed of you," she replied, her voice steady. "And in the dreams of others, your magic grows." The garden's breath was a breeze that brushed her hair from her face. "Dreams are the seeds of the garden," it said. "But even dreams must be tended. You carry the bell's echo, now will you carry its song?" Elara hesitated, feeling the silver key warm against her heart even in sleep. "What must I do?" she asked. "Listen," the garden said, and the silver bell chimed once more. In its song, Elara heard not just the garden's stories, but her own. She saw the children's laughter, the hush of the hearth, the weaving of magic in every gentle word. She saw herself standing on the edge of childhood, and something more, something deeper. "I will listen," she whispered, her hand on the bell's cool curve. "I will keep your song alive." The bell's chime pulsed through her like moonlight on water, filling her with a quiet strength. She felt the garden's breath settle around her, as gentle as a lullaby. When she woke, the dawn was soft and golden, and the scent of night-blooming jasmine still clung to her hair. She knew then that the garden would always be with her, as long as she carried its song in her heart. And in that knowing, Elara smiled, ready to weave the garden's magic into every breath of her waking life. As days turned to weeks, Elara's stories wove their way through the village like a river of silver light. Children carried whispers of the garden in their laughter, and elders saw its echo in the glow of the hearth's last embers. Each evening she shared a new tale, a story of a flower that only bloomed in the breath of the moon, or a fox that spoke in riddles at the edge of dreams. With every telling, the garden's song grew stronger, its magic weaving through the lives of those who dared to listen. But it was in the quiet hours of the night that Elara felt the garden most. She would wake from sleep to find her window bathed in moonlight, and in the hush of that silver glow, she heard voices soft and distant like the echo of the bell. One night, as she drifted between waking and dreaming, she heard the laughter of children she had never met. Their voices bright as starlight, She saw a girl with hair like river foam, her feet bare on dewy grass. She saw a boy whose eyes held the promise of faraway seas, and a woman whose song could mend broken hearts. They were dreamers scattered across the world, each one touched by the garden's breath, though they had never set foot within its gates. Elara understood then that the garden was not bound by iron fences or moonlit paths. It lived in the hearts of those who dared to dream no matter how far away. When dawn came, Elara rose with the knowledge that her stories were bridges. Each word a step across the distance between souls. She was no longer just a girl who had walked the garden's paths. She was a weaver of dreams, a keeper of the bell's quiet song. That day, she sat in the shade of the old willow that grew behind her grandmother's cottage, its branches a green echo of the silver willow in her dreams. She closed her eyes and let the memories wash over her, the scent of jasmine, the hush of moonlight, the promise in every secret smile. And she began to write. Her words flowed like the river she had always known, ran through her heart, soft, bright, and endless. With every story she shared, she felt the garden bloom anew, a garden that would never fade as long as dreamers dared to listen. That night, as the village slept beneath a sky stitched with stars, Elara felt the garden's call more strongly than ever. The silver bell's echo pulsed in her blood, a quiet summons that tugged at the edges of her dreams. She drifted into sleep, and in the hush of moonlight, she found herself once more in the midnight garden. But this time, it was different. The garden seemed deeper, older, each shadow rich with the weight of centuries. Elara followed the winding path, her feet brushing grass that glowed with every step. She felt the presence of the bell, though she could not yet see it, its song weaving through the branches like a promise. In the heart of the garden, she found a stranger waiting. He was tall, with eyes the color of twilight, and hair that shimmered like midnight water. He wore a cloak of deep blue, the edges embroidered with silver threads that seemed to shift and dance as he moved. "Who are you?" Elara asked, her voice soft in the moonlit stillness. He smiled, though his eyes held a quiet sorrow. "A dreamer," he said. "Like you." Elara felt a flicker of recognition, a memory that was not her own, but as familiar as her own heartbeat. "You hear the bell?" she asked. "I do," he said. "Its song has called me across many nights, though I have never seen its face." They stood in silence, the garden's breath soft around them. Elara realized then that the garden was not hers alone. It belonged to all who listened, all who dreamed. "Why have you come?" she asked. He looked away, his eyes tracing the path of moonlight through the willow branches. "To find what I have lost," he said, "and to remember what I once knew." Elara reached out her fingers, brushing the silver thread that bound her wrist, a thread that pulsed faintly with the garden's magic. "Then let us walk together," she said. "The garden will guide us." Side by side, they walked deeper into the moonlit hush, their steps weaving new paths in the ancient earth. Elara felt the bell's echo grow stronger, and she knew that this journey was no longer hers alone. They were two dreamers bound by the garden's song, two souls woven into the same tapestry of moonlight and shadow. And as they walked, the garden watched patient and silent, its secrets waiting to unfold. Elara and the stranger walked beneath the willow's arching branches, each step weaving them deeper into the midnight garden's heart. The air shimmered with the soft glow of starlight, and the garden's song rose around them like the hush of 1,000 whispered tales. They spoke little at first, letting the garden's breath fill the silence. But as the path wound deeper, the stranger began to share his story. "My name is Kaelin," he said, his voice quiet and edged with wonder. "I have wandered through many dreams, always seeking something I could not name." Elara listened, her heart opening like a blossom in moonlight. She told him of the silver bell and the gifts she had found, the petal, the thorn, the thread that wove her path. Each one was a choice, she said, a promise that the garden does not give lightly. Kaelin nodded. "And what did you choose?" he asked. Elara smiled softly. "To carry the garden's song, to be a keeper of its stories." As they spoke, the path curved to reveal a clearing, bathed in silver light. In the center, the silver bell shimmered its chime, weaving through the night like a living breath. Elara reached for Kalen's hand, their fingers brushing like the meeting of rivers. Together, they stepped into the clearing, the bell's song growing brighter with every breath. "I have always heard the bell," Kalen whispered, "but I never dared to ring it." "Then let us ring it together," Elara said. The silver bell glowed brighter as they approached its surface, alive with the reflection of their joined hands. Elara felt the gifts she had gathered stir in her heart, the petals' gentle courage, the thorns' quiet strength, the threads' promise of connection. They reached for the bell as one, their fingers closing around its smooth, cold curve. For a moment, the garden held its breath, moonlight pausing, shadows stilling. Then they rang it. The sound was soft and endless, weaving through the garden like a river of light. Elara felt the echo in her bones, and in Kalen's hand, she felt his own quiet wonder. In that single, perfect note, they knew they were no longer alone. The garden shimmered around them, each flower unfolding like a sigh of moonlight. And in the bell's song, they heard the promise of the garden that every dreamer who dared to listen would find their own reflection in its magic. As the last note faded, Elara turned to Kalen, her eyes bright with tears that glowed like silver. "This is our story now," she said. And Kalen smiled a smile that held every dream they had ever dared to speak. "Then let us carry it together," he said. In the hush of the midnight garden, with the bell's echo still singing in their blood, they stepped forward. Two dreamers bound by moonlight and the quiet, eternal breath of the garden. The silver bell's echo lingered in the hush of the midnight garden, a breathless promise that bound Elara and Kalen closer with every heartbeat. The moon hung high above a pale guardian, casting their shadows long and silver. They stood hand in hand, the garden's breath a soft sigh around them. But as the last note of the bell faded, the garden seemed to shift, its beauty deepening into something darker. Older, as though every petal and every leaf had always been watching. A figure stepped from the shadows beneath the willow. It was the Keeper of Thorns, her black feathered cloak rustling softly like wings of midnight. "You have rung the bell together," she said, her voice a thread of ancient music. "But the garden does not grant its gifts without price." Elara felt her heart steady. She had always known there would be a price. "What must we give?" she asked, her voice quiet but sure. The Keeper's dark eyes softened, and she reached out a hand. In her palm lay a single silver seed, small and perfect, pulsing faintly with moonlight. "The garden asks not for what you have," she said, "but for what you are willing to share." Elara looked at Kalen, and he met her gaze without fear. In that moment, they both understood the garden's magic was not meant to be owned. It was meant to be tended, shared in every story, every dream, every breath. They took the seed together, feeling its quiet warmth settle into their joined hands. As they held it, the garden seemed to sigh in relief, a breath that carried the hush of 1,000 moonlit nights. "Plant it in the waking world," the Keeper said softly. "Let it grow not in soil, but in the hearts of those who listen. In every word, in every song, the garden will bloom anew." Elara closed her eyes, feeling the truth of the Keeper's words settle in her bones. She saw the children gathered by the hearth, their wide eyes bright with wonder. She saw the strangers' laughter, the songs of the river, the hush of dawn on the hills. She opened her eyes and nodded. "We will plant it," she said. "We will carry the garden's song wherever we go." The Keeper smiled a smile that held both the weight of centuries and the tenderness of a single bloom. "Then go," she said, "and let the garden live in every dream you share." As she spoke, the garden shimmered around them. Moonlight flowed like water, and the path that had led them here opened once more. Elara felt the silver key warm against her heart, a quiet pulse of promise. With Kalen's hand in hers, she stepped forward out of the garden's dream and into the soft light of dawn, carrying the silver seed and the bell's echo in every breath. When Elara woke, dawn was painting the sky in soft hues of rose and gold. She lay still for a moment, the weight of the dream lingering like the hush of moonlight on her skin. Beside her, the silver seed lay in the crook of her palm, warm and bright as a heartbeat. She rose and dressed quietly, her grandmother already tending the hearth, the scent of sweet herbs rising in the morning air. Kalen waited outside, his eyes bright with the promise of 1,000 dreams. In his hand, he held the same silver seed, though they both knew it was truly one and the same. "Are you ready?" he asked. Elara nodded, her heart steady. "I am. Let's plant it together." They stepped into the quiet garden behind the cottage, the old willow's branches sighing in the dawn breeze. The earth was soft and cool beneath their fingers, the scent of dew and moss rising around them. But as they knelt, they remembered the keeper's words. "Let it grow not in soil, but in the hearts of those who listen." Elara closed her hand around the seed, her voice soft. "The garden is not just a place," she said. "It's every story we tell, every hope we share." Kalen smiled, and together they turned away from the patch of earth, choosing instead to carry the seed in the quiet places of their hearts. That day, they began to walk the paths of the village, sharing the garden's song. Elara's voice wove the silver bell's echo into every tale she told by the hearth. Each word a gentle petal unfolding in the minds of those who listened. Kalen played music at the edge of twilight, his melodies weaving the hush of moonlight into the air. And wherever they spoke, the midnight garden bloomed anew, in the laughter of children, in the quiet wonder of the old, in the hush of night when the stars leaned close to listen. In every dream, in every story, the silver bell sang softly, reminding them that the garden's magic was never truly gone. It lived in the breath of every storyteller, in the heartbeat of every dreamer. And so it was that the midnight garden became more than moonlight and silver paths. It became a promise that as long as there were those who believed, it would never fade. Elara and Kalen carried that promise through the years, two dreamers bound by a single chime of silver, a single bloom of moonlight. And in every tale they shared, in every heart they touched, the garden lived on eternal as the breath of the stars.